Serena had always been the kind of woman who kept her feelings to herself. She was not loud, she was not dramatic. She simply watched people carefully, thought deeply about everything, and smiled at the right moments, even when nothing inside her felt like smiling. She had grown up in a small, ordinary house with her mother and two younger brothers. Her father had left when she was 9 years old, and her mother had worked 2 jobs for years without ever once complaining about it. From all of that, Serena learned one thing very clearly. Life was not something that waited for you to be ready. You either moved forward or you got left behind. So when the Mercer family approached her mother with a proposal, when they suggested that their son, Damien Mercer, would like to meet Serena with the intention of marriage, Serena did not say no. She thought about her mother's tired eyes. She thought about her brother's school fees. She thought about what it would mean for her family if she became part of one of the most powerful families in the country, and she said yes. She met Damien 3 weeks later, over dinner, at a restaurant where the menu had no prices. He was tall and well-dressed, and spoke with the kind of confidence that came not from experience, but from never having been told no. He asked her 2 questions about herself that evening, and spent the rest of the time talking about his own work. When she laughed at something, he looked at her the way a person looks at a painting, admiring the appearance of it, but not curious about what was behind it. Still, she continued, she told herself this was how it worked. She told herself that feelings would come later, that marriage was also a decision, not only an emotion. The engagement was announced at a formal banquet. 200 people attended. Serena wore a dress she had not chosen. She stood beside Damien while people photographed them, and she smiled, and smiled, and smiled, and deep inside her chest, something very quiet was slowly going dark. It was during that same evening, just before the dessert was served, that she watched Damien speak to his elderly mother across the table. His mother had started a sentence, trying to say something gentle, something warm. Damien cut her off mid-word, not cruelly, not with any visible anger, just with total indifference, as if his mother's voice were a sound that simply did not matter to him. He went on speaking to someone else without even glancing back. Serena put down her champagne glass very quietly. She excused herself to the restroom. She walked down a hallway. She found a coat check at the end of it. She collected her coat. She walked out the front door into the cold night air, got into a taxi, and went home. On the bathroom counter of the suite they had given her for the weekend, she placed the engagement ring. She left no note, she sent no message. She packed one small bag, just the things that were truly hers, and by 4 in the morning, she was on a train heading toward an airport. She chose Ireland the way some people choose a name for a pet, quickly, on instinct, without overthinking it. She had seen a photograph of Galway once, years ago, in a magazine at a dentist's office. The harbor looked gray and cold and honest. That was enough. She found a small stone cottage to rent at the edge of the city, near enough to walk to things, but far enough to feel alone when she needed to. She found work at a community college, teaching basic drawing and color theory to adult learners. The pay was modest, the hours were reasonable, the students were mostly older than her, and they asked genuine questions, and they were grateful in a quiet, real way that she had never felt from anyone in Damien's world. She bought a dog from a family whose golden retriever had produced more puppies than they expected. She named him Biscuit because he was exactly that color, and because it made her laugh every time she said it. He slept at the foot of her bed and followed her into every room, and treated every single morning as though it were the best morning that had ever happened. For the first time in her adult life, Serena began to feel like herself. She did not think much about Damien. When she did, it was not with anger or regret. It was more like remembering a narrow escape. She had not disliked him as a person exactly. She had simply understood, at the last possible moment, that being beside him would mean slowly disappearing, and she had chosen herself instead. She had been in Galway for about 3 months when she met Killian Ward. His car had broken down in the rain on the narrow road that passed by her cottage. She had heard the engine sputter and stop from her kitchen window, and she had gone outside with an umbrella because it was the obvious thing to do. He was standing beside the car looking at his phone, with the expression of someone who already knew the phone was not going to help. She offered him tea, and the use of her landline to call a mechanic. He accepted both. He sat at her kitchen table, while Biscuit investigated his shoes thoroughly. He was quiet in a comfortable way. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the silence of someone who did not feel the need to fill space. He drank his tea without asking for sugar. He thanked her twice, once when she handed it to him, and once just before he left. When the mechanic came and sorted the car, Killian gave Serena a small, genuine nod and said it had been very kind of her. He came back the next afternoon with her umbrella and a paper bag of pastries from a bakery in town. They stood at her doorway for 20 minutes talking about nothing important. The weather, the bakery, whether the road needed better lighting. And then he left again, and Serena went back inside and noticed, with mild surprise, that she was still smiling. He came back again the following week, and the week after that, and slowly, without any particular announcement, he became a regular presence, not in a way that crowded her, but in a way that simply fit. He would knock on a Saturday. They would walk along the harbor with Biscuit pulling ahead on his lead. They would sit somewhere and eat something and talk, really talk, the way Serena had not talked to anyone in a very long time. She learned that he had once been a business partner at a large firm in London, that he had built much of it alongside another man, a man whose name she would not hear until later. That 3 years ago, he had raised serious concerns about the direction that firm was taking, about decisions being made that he believed were wrong, that the other man had dismissed him, pushed him out, and then spent the next year telling everyone in their industry that Cillian had left because he was not good enough. Killian spoke about all of this without bitterness, which Serena found more impressive than if he had been angry. He had simply decided that being right, quietly, over time, was worth more than winning a public argument. He had come to Ireland and built something small and careful and honest. It was working. One evening in autumn, sitting outside a pub near the water, she told him about the engagement. She did not plan the conversation. It came out naturally, the way the real things always do. She told him about Damien, about the banquet, about the ring on the bathroom counter. She told him she had not looked back. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, simply and without drama, "Good." She looked at him. He said it again, "I mean it. Good for you." She understood, in that moment, that he was not performing. He genuinely meant it. It was around that time that she also learned the name of the man Cillian had left behind in London. When he said it, Damien Mercer, she went very still. Cillian noticed. She told him, quietly, that she knew that name. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Of course you do." And instead of making it strange or heavy, he simply picked up his drink and said, "I'm glad you left when you did." They did not speak of it again that night, but something shifted between them. Not toward drama, but toward a deeper kind of understanding. Two people who had both stood close to the same cold fire, and had both, in their own ways, walked away from it. Damien arrived on a Tuesday in November. Serena was at the pub with Killian for their usual Friday dinner, except it was a Tuesday, because her schedule had changed that week. When she saw him walk in through the door, he wore a long coat. He looked exactly the same. He scanned the room the way he always had, as though he were assessing it rather than entering it. She saw him before he saw her. She did not feel panic. She did not feel her heart race. What she felt, more than anything, was a kind of steady clarity, the way you feel when you have been right about something for a long time and the proof has simply arrived. She waited until he found her eyes. Then she stood, calmly, and walked toward him. He said she had embarrassed him. He said she had walked away from something most people could only dream of. He said she had made herself into a story people told at dinner parties, and not the good kind. She looked at him for a long moment. He had traveled very far to say these things. He had found her in a small city in another country to deliver this message. She thought about what that meant, about how much energy a person had to spend on their own pride to do something like that. She said to him, quietly and without cruelty, "You came all this way to tell me I was right." She saw something move behind his eyes. Not anger exactly. Something more uncomfortable than anger. Then Cillian was there, not rushing, not raising his voice, simply standing beside her, just beside her, not in front. He looked at Damien the way two people look at each other when they have a very long history, and neither of them wants to pretend they don't. He asked Damien, in a completely level voice, if there was anything else. There was a long silence. Damien looked at Serena, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time, and she could see that he understood something in that moment that he had not understood before. She was not broken. She was not hiding. She was standing in an ordinary pub in Galway, in a warm coat, with her dog at her feet, and a man beside her who knew her, and she was fine. She was more than fine. He left without another word. The door closed behind him. Serena sat back down. Biscuit put his head in her lap. Killian sat across from her and asked if she wanted another coffee or something stronger. She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from relief and warmth, and the solid feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be. She said coffee was fine. That was all. There was no dramatic ending, no long speech, no moment where everything turned into something cinematic. Life, the real kind, does not work that way. It simply continues, quietly and steadily, and with small, honest pleasures that add up to something very full. Damien flew back to London that same night. What happened inside him on that flight, no one could say for certain. But people who knew him said that in the months that followed, he became slightly quieter, slightly less certain. Whether that was growth or simply loss, it was hard to tell from the outside. Serena kept teaching. Her students kept asking genuine questions and being grateful in that quiet, real way. Biscuit kept treating every morning like a miracle. She and Killian argued gently about whether to get a second dog. They got the second dog. They named her Muffin, which Killian pretended to find embarrassing, but which he said out loud every single day with obvious affection. On Friday evenings, they sat near the harbor with the lights on the water and the sound of ordinary life all around them, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was, in every honest way that mattered, everything.